I think a couple of things. A few years ago, people said the problem is the batteries. Actually, today, people say that the problem is the batteries. But we've learned that the batteries do work. We've got hybrid buses running in commerce with millions of miles now collected on the performance of those and demonstrated excellent performance in the field. We've got plug-in hybrids out there operating at large scale, and they're operating quite well. So after 4 years of production of this technology, we've been able to demonstrate that you can depend on the technology to be reliable. What we've learned is that there are a lot of forces against a movement like this, a lot of natural forces against it. There's a lot of inertia that exists within the industry, and within the automotive world where we travel around the globe, there are very few examples of what Carlos has done, which is demonstrate leadership from the top and say, hey, we're going to do this. For the most part, the companies are a little bit concerned. They're concerned about the take-up from the consumer. They're concerned about the consumer getting the longer-term value of the battery and seeing that and being willing to put money up front for that. They're concerned about the impact it would have on their social structure. Companies that have been making gearboxes for a long period of time wonder what are they going to do with those employees. And the trade-offs that are there are creating jobs with the new technology are clearly a great opportunity, but we need a push forward on this thing to take all that inertia out of the system. And I think that's what this Electrification Coalition program does.
So the president says, okay, guys, gals, you had me at hello. I'm for your electric car. You've convinced me it's real. The potential is all there. What do you need me to now do to really take what all of you, the different pieces that you've all developed, and bring them together into a system? Because if you don't have a system, you don't have a solution. If you don't have a system that's as easy to charge and move your vehicle around as gas stations, then you don't have a real solution. So what do you all need Senator Dorgan to do and his colleagues in the Senate by way of legislation, and then we'll let the senator respond as to where things are, in order to create that system so all your different pieces can come together? Please.
I don't know if I can write legislation, but I think that what's necessary is the right kind of incentives for manufacturing, the tentativeness that was talked about around the automotive manufacturing, the stranded assets that are involved, the understanding that in order to get to this vision that people see, we have to bridge a gap. And the gap has a lot to do with scale, but it's also around consumer anxiety around miles driven, also consumer anxiety around vehicles that aren't proven from a technology standpoint. There's always going to be early adopters, but for this to become mainstream, you've got to be able to deal with that anxiety. You've also got legislation that's put in place to protect the consumer that is in the way in some ways. We have batteries that need to last 10 years and vehicles that may not last that long on the road. So you've got to deal with battery costs that are built in that are quite frankly over-engineered. What do you do with these batteries? Because they still have a useful life at the end of the vehicle. Do you purchase them? Do you lease them? When people buy a vehicle, they don't buy a vehicle for a purchase price. They want to know what their payments are going to be and what their operating costs. It's a very complicated problem. We have to find a way to simplify that for the consumer. So the best view is from the consumer back. How do we put legislation, policies, regulations, support in place to help the consumer deal from a paradigm that they have around monthly payments, monthly leases, and that will help move this thing forward.
So, if horses could have voted, we wouldn't have had cars. And if gearboxes could vote, we won't have electric cars. I mean, how do we get over that? Please, then we'll go there. Yeah. Please.
Well, I think that one of the great things about the roadmap that we have produced is that it is very specific in answering your question, is that let's focus our efforts on 6 to 8 so-called ecosystems where you create the infrastructure and the system, and you have the electric cars and everything that supports that as a demonstration, not only that this is a viable concept, but also to start giving this massive, enough of a scale to reduce the cost. And then we are saying that after that, for the next phase, you go to 20 of these ecosystems. So I think we try to be very, very specific and very clear in terms of steps that one needs to take.
But for the audience who hasn't had a chance to read the report, you got to sell Senator Dorgan. He's a busy guy. He's working on health care. He's got a lot of issues up there in North Dakota. Where do you want him to start? Which ecosystem piece or ecosystem should he start with that would really help enable all of this?
You're saying 3 steps. The first step is that to make it possible for the consumer to actually buy the car. Mm-hmm. That means that currently there is incentive for people buying electric cars. We are saying let's put that as a multiple of the kilowatts in the car, mm-hmm. and therefore make so that they can make the initial investment.
So it is
very easy to demonstrate to them that the operating cost is lower.
Right.
But to make the that's the first. The second thing is that we are suggesting that you support the communities with about 75% of the cost of putting in the charging infrastructure, mm-hmm. and so on. And then we are suggesting that in the first step, you support the creation of the smart grid in these ecosystems, because then it becomes manageable, the cost becomes manageable, but it will make it possible to clearly demonstrate that this is a viable technology.
Senator Dorgan, can you help?
Well, first of all, thanks. The consumers ultimately will make this judgment and decide whether this approach will succeed or fail. I mean, that's a fact. But it's also a fact that there has not been any sort of urgent national will to change anything over a long period of time. And there is an urgent requirement now to have greater energy security. I mean, in rough numbers, about 70% of our oil comes from outside of our country, and about 70% of it is used in vehicles. If you're going to do something about our dependency on foreign oil, then you have to do something about the way we power our vehicles. There's just a lot of things that have to be done, however, to give consumers some feeling that you're creating the infrastructure to do this. If you're going to maximize the production of American energy here, what kind of energy? Renewable? Wind from Texas to Dakota? And then collect the energy from the wind, move it to a load center? Because we don't need it. We have the greatest wind potential in America. We're the Saudi Arabia of wind in North Dakota, according to the Department of Energy. We're all born leading to the northwest. And the fact is, we don't need any more wind, so to the extent we produce it, it has to go on a transmission line and move towards a load center. What kind of power are you going to develop? How are you going to move it to where it's needed? What kind of standards are you going to have for the plugs so that you can get the power to that garage so that someone can plug in a car or a vehicle and charge it in 3 hours or 2 hours rather than 8 hours or 10 hours? All of those things are important. There's an old Cherokee Indian chief who once observed, the success of a rain dance depends a lot on timing. Well, as a wise old chief, I might say. But, the timing is critical. And if we as a country decide as a matter of national will, here's where we're headed, and you can count on it, invest in it, believe in it, and we'll do the things necessary to develop the infrastructure, and then the consumers take a look at this and see, yes, it's in our interest to do this, in our consumers' interest, then it's going to happen.
Has the President shown the leadership for that?
Sure. I mean, take a look at what we've put in the appropriations bills in the Economic Recovery Act and others. We've got substantial amounts of money on battery technology. I mean, a lot of money on battery, a lot of money on transmission, smart grid. It's the largest venture capital fund ever housed anywhere in the federal government. The Department of Energy has $37.5 billion in the Economic Recovery Fund, much of it moving in the directions that are necessary to accomplish a conversion to an electric drive future.
Is this a nonpartisan issue, or is this one that still divides the Senate?
Well, first of all, I think we're always going to use fossil energy. We will use it in different ways, I believe, by doing it with lower carbon output. And there has been, I think, for a long, long time, a notion that, real men dig and drill, and other people just wear patches on their coats and smoke pipes and then talk about the sweet by and by when maybe you capture something from the wind, maybe you capture something from the sun. Good for you, but you're not folks that are talking reality. I think things have changed a lot, and I think most of us now understand we're going to continue to use fossil energy in a different way, but we should be less dependent on it from other countries, and we should develop more energy here in a smart way that represents American energy, and then develop a different system with respect to the powering of our vehicles. And this is the first step in describing that. You can go beyond this and think about hydrogen fuel cells, which is also an electric drive replacing the battery for the fuel cell. But, I think this is a very important step because the country has to decide as a matter of national will, here's where we're headed, and you can count on it.